Hope I didn't scare you. Strap in tight, because we're about to shed some light on the dark side of woodworking. So guys, this video today is personal to me, and it may piss some people off. When I was coming up in the woodworking world, nobody told me these things. I was fed things that aren't true, not because people are purposely doing it, but it's because the people that know don't really have time to tell you this side of the story. And so I felt obligated today to tell you from my experience, the dark side of woodworking and the lies that we're told that we aren't really intentionally told that keep us from growing our woodworking business and keep us from understanding how the woodworking industry actually works. So let's get right into it. And starting with one of the first things that was pretty eye-opening to me was how cutthroat this industry really is. So as soon as you start to establish yourself as a woodworking business in this industry, you're gonna have salespeople come out of the woodworks, right? You're gonna have a guy selling you wood, a guy selling you machinery, a guy selling you bits, a guy selling you blades. Some will talk bad about others, some won't and say they're a good company, and you're just gonna be over encumbered by how many different angles and how many people are coming at you saying who they know, who's a good guy, who's a bad guy. So that's a lot. The second thing is you're gonna have people come try to tour your shop and steal your ideas. So other guys from different countries or domestically are gonna come and try to steal your ideas from you. And some of them even may come and tour your shop just to try to pick your brain and steal stuff from you, right? In the woodworking industry, it's just like every other industry out there. People are trying to feed their families, make money, and countries are involved, right? Like Vietnam, Taiwan, China. Like these are big, giant powerhouse countries that are competing in the wood industry that you're getting into. So be prepared for that. I mean, it is a extremely cutthroat industry and not everybody's out there to be your friend. So being able to weed through that grass and find yourself is extremely difficult, especially in those first couple years as you're coming up. It's pretty bad. It gets pretty ugly pretty quick if you're not prepared. So be prepared for that. One of the other things I soon learned after starting is the amount of money involved in the wood industry. I came from starting with $75, right, in my parents' horse barn, right? My family wasn't rich, we didn't come from a lot, and come to find out there's companies out there that are backed by investors and multi-million-dollar firms, right? And they have all this backing so they can run at a loss for a number of years just to invade a market. I mean, just like normal business. There's guys out there that start a woodworking business just to sell it to venture capitalists. Like those are things that are out there, and there's huge giant conglomerates that are eating up different parts of the wood industry. I didn't know this coming up. Like I had no earthly idea. And so this is what I'm trying to portray to you is like, there are companies out there that have been around for a long time, are tied to a lot of money and have a lot of backing, have multiple locations, so they can beat you on the money side. And so you have to get creative to figure out how to beat those companies, right? And that's something I learned the hard way. Now, tying on to that same point is the amount of money it takes to really get going and really start playing with these big guys. If you're a hobbyist or a weekend warrior like I used to be, you have a miter saw, a couple planers. When you start getting into the machinery range of it's $10,000, $100,000, $50,000, all of that range, you're gonna have to shell out some cash. You're gonna have to understand finance. You're gonna have to understand business and really become a business owner. And so if you're the hobbyist looking at this and going, man, I don't want to do that, it may not be a bad idea to just stay with that and stay with your small pieces of equipment. I kept my old hobby shop so I can go back there and dabble with stuff because I liked it, because behind me right here is hundreds and thousands of dollars of industrial equipment, and I had to get that just to start competing with those guys. Now, you don't have to start off there. Don't get me wrong, you do not have to shell out $100,000 to start, right? All of this was bootstrapped, and every piece of equipment bought the next piece of equipment, right? So I'm not in like way over my head with any of this. Now, with all this equipment, I can finally compete on a decently level playing field. Before that, I was always competing up because they had better equipment, more money, more backing, and they've been around for longer periods of time. So the point of all this is just understand that there's people with a lot of money, a lot of backing with really expensive equipment, and you got to find your way and your niche and your competitive advantage to start to beat those guys. So right in line with me saying I have all this equipment, it's super nice and super expensive and all that good stuff, the more toys and gadgets don't necessarily equal more profit. When you're coming up and you're watching a lot of YouTube videos, you're trying to learn a lot of different things, and you're seeing these amazing speed squares and these amazing pencils and different saws, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be the best business, right? Having more toys and a whole bunch of gadgets and gizmos, the thing is you have to teach people to use those gadgets and gizmos and not just yourself. We don't have a lot of weird random things. We have the basics like tape measure, speed square, regular miter saw. I mean, like this shop behind me doesn't even have a table saw. We have a straight line rip saw that does all of our stuff for us, but a table saw wasn't really a need. Occasionally we'll bring in like the job site saw, wheel it up and cut our pieces that we need, but that's not our game we're playing, so I don't have to worry about that. Another thing that I noticed is when I went to these big industrial shops that are making a lot of money, none of them had like Festool. They don't really use them in that big shop, right? It's all more industrialized stuff. Did I use those tools to work my way up to the big equipment? Absolutely yes. But when I got to that point, I realized like there wasn't a lot of that equipment around. Well, it's because these big shops don't use that. So you have to train people to use this highly specialized equipment, and sometimes it's not safe, so they're worried about guys cutting off their fingers, so they have to get this heavy duty industrialized equipment, which is super important for safety and insurance and all that other stuff. And if you have no employees and you wanna hire one guy to help you out on the weekends to sand, that's perfectly fine, but when you start getting outside people to come in, the quality may drop. So you have to watch out for those things, and that could become an issue, and that's why this industrial equipment is the way it is. And let's say you are one of those really, really highly talented craftsmen, and you put your heart and soul into each piece of furniture you're making. What I have come to realize is that there's only a select number of customers that truly, truly, deeply care how crafted your material is, or how crafted whatever you're doing is. A lot of them just want the finished product. They don't care that you use domino joints, and they don't care that you use biscuits, and they don't care what type of glue you use. They just want a nice finished product, a good finish on it. They want it to be heavy. That was one of the things that was really hard for me to comprehend, because I'm a wood nerd, right? You're probably a wood nerd. You love this stuff. You live and breathe like, okay, this is walnut from here. It's dried at 8%. I'm gonna use this type of glue, this type of dowel rod, because the structural integrity of it is 10% higher than not using this specific thing. All of that doesn't matter as much as you think it does. And I learned this the hard way, and this is a really hard pill for me to swallow, because I care so deeply about how meticulously something is crafted. Me personally, I couldn't find those customers that cared that deeply about it, but you may be the guy that finds those customers that cares deeply about every single thing that's crafted about your table or your bench top or your cabinet, and you can sell to that market. It's typically a higher end market, but from what I have found out, people do not care as deeply and as much as you do about how good you crafted something. They just want it to look nice. And one of the last things I found out, and one of the truths that I found in this dark side of the woodworking world, is how good people really are. Like when I was coming up, I had a pretty good ego because I was the best in my county at woodworking, right? Once you start expanding out, you see people on YouTube that are extremely good, and you're like, oh my God, I can never be as good as that guy. Like, look how good they are. Well, picture that, and then imagine everybody that's not on YouTube that's even better than them or equally talented. The pool of players and the talent level that's out there versus what you see is a significant difference. And so me thinking I was good at what I do and extremely crafted, and I see some guy on YouTube and I think I'm better than him, right? And I see another guy on YouTube and I know I'm better than him. Then I see like the top dog, right? That top dog may not be the top dog in the wood industry as a whole, just the top dog that you subscribe to on YouTube. Those guys are good. They're like professionals, right? They're making a living, not having to video their stuff, not even having to market their products that way. It's so good, they don't even have to do that. It's mind-blowing, the pool of talent out there. And so that's one of the other things that I've learned. It's like, no matter how good I am at woodworking, there's probably gonna be somebody better than me. And that sucked. And then I realized all these other things that I told you in the video, and that helped me kind of navigate my own personal path and my way through this dark side of woodworking. Now, with all of that being said, I didn't make this video to scare you. I made it to inform you and to almost empower you so you can go through this dark side and see the light a lot faster than I did, because it's really important, and I want y'all guys to succeed. I want y'all to grow in the woodworking world. If you're a hobbyist, I hope this opened your eyes to the potential that's out there, that you might actually want to do a woodworking business, because it's a beautiful, amazing industry, but it's just like all the other industries out there. So don't think it's that much different. Guys, if you like this, please subscribe. We're trying to get to 100,000 subscribers by the end of the year. And I hope you left this video with more knowledge than when you started. And remember guys, if you ain't cutting it close, you ain't cutting it right. The dark side. I can't.